Hi, I'm Shay Oliver. Welcome to the Priority Paradigm. I'm sharing stories of amazing people who have made radical changes in their life for something more important. Today, I'm joined by Arieann DeFazio, and Arieann has a very cool story to tell us. So without further ado, Arieann, tell us your story.
All right. Well, like I said, that's kind of a broad topic. So I'm going to narrow this down a little bit here and just kind of give you guys just a real quick snapshot of who you might be dealing with you're listening to for however long this takes. So kind of the way I describe myself, and by the way, this is also my first line of my Tinder profile, so it's a real good one, where it's basically like, I am an unchaperoned child at a birthday party, and I am just running around, eating icing, throwing balls in the ball pit, just fucking shit up. And that's kind of just who I am, like as a person and if on a daily basis. But I also have, if you were to look at my resume, you would not think that. I have an all-but degree PhD in biochemistry. I, have run 3 companies now. I've been in the leadership team of something like 8 startups at this point. Was a nationally ranked athlete in college. I do speaking now, so I do like keynote talks. But at the same time, like I also like completely smoked myself out of my apartment because I was too lazy to push the certain amount of time on the microwave and burnt the shit out of this bagel to the point where it melted it into the plastic and created toxic smoke, and I couldn't breathe, and I basically poisoned myself all evening. So like kind of what I try to get across to people, and this is something that I'm personally still working on, and I call integrating the adult and the child, because I think it's very important to keep the child, and that's something we lose as adults. But at the same time, it's really difficult to integrate them both, and a lot of people have a hard time understanding how those two people can coexist, how like this complete quote unquote shit show of a person who can't even cook a bagel and someone who can run a company are the same person. And I'm here as living proof that that's in fact the case. Like you could be those people. So yeah, that's kind of my quick intro there.
Well, tell us a little bit more about how you ended up in college, doing what you're doing, and then going down the path you're on.
Well, I'm going to start a little bit earlier than college, and this isn't like something I share with a lot of people, but I'm going to therapy, so I can share more now. But basically, I was, yeah, I know, right? It works. It does. I was the critic for a long time. I was not born to this life. I did not start out, like if you were looking at my life as a child, you'd be like, this person's going to be a coked out stripper. Like that statistically is where I should have ended up at. I've been shot. I've run for, like I was the kid running from the cops in high school, but also a band geek. Like it was, I've been weird my whole life, but yeah, I actually grew up in the system. I was in the foster care system for about 4 years there as a teenager. So I went through all of that, like really did not have a good home situation, in case that wasn't an indication before that. So it was just like shit show on top of shit show on top of shit show for like 20 years of my life straight. And, like I was having to pay rent and feed myself at 13. And at the time, like I think back at it, I just think of a younger version of me, but I look at 13-year-olds now and it clicks just how insane that actually was. So yeah, now it's kind of double-edged sword. A lot of good things came out of that, right? Like I can literally survive anything. In fact, my joke is that I'm notably difficult to kill. People tried. And so I have like this whole resilience thing, but at the same time, it did put up a lot of like emotional walls that I found out, especially when I was leading teams that were causing issues. And that took me a really long time to like kind of come to terms with. But yeah, so that's how that started. But like I said, at the same time that I was running from the cops, I was also going to band practice. So been a dichotomous person my entire life. And I went through all that. So I knew I was going to college, right? Because that had been beaten in my head, as any, kid that grew up in the 80s, 90s, that was beaten to your head, and I'm sure it still is. So I was going to college, and I wanted to be since I was like 5, I was like, I'm a scientist. Like, that's who I am, and that's what I'm going to go do. So Of course, I was laughed at because everybody's like, what do you want to do with your life? I'm like, I'm going to own a pharmaceutical company, which, by the way, I'm still going to do at some point. And they were just like, that's ridiculous. You're not going to be able to do that. That's for rich people. And anyway, so went to college to get my degree. And I think I got my undergraduate in molecular cell science, something or other. I honestly don't even know because it wasn't important. And then, but at the same time I was doing that, I started my first company. So I started working in my first startup when I was 19.
Wow.
Again, because I need money. Like this wasn't like a strategic thought out thing. It wasn't like an adult was sitting me down. I was like, hey, this would be good for your life. I was like, I need to eat. And it was the job available at the time. So I ended up like running their entire office. So I ended up becoming like more of like a COO character, and then I would just run payroll. I mean, like I am 19 running this company's payroll, health benefits, their office. It was not a good idea. Like the CEO, I don't know what the fuck he was thinking, because like you should not get that responsibility at 19-year-old. Anyway, so did that, helped found my first company when I was 21. Was kind of a splinter group that went off of this other company. It was a game development company, and we actually had one of the first apps on the iPhone. So that's kind of one of my claims to fame. Cool. I didn't code it. I can't code with a shit. I'm a solid copy paster though, just putting that out. So for all of you thinking that you can't start companies without a tech background, that's bullshit. And yeah, so did that. Was still going to college. Graduated with my undergrad, and at that point I left the company because I had it so ingrained in my head. And this is kind of, I think, more to your point, where you're trying to get across to your audience, is like, we have these very set, regimented things that we're supposed to do, right? So nerds like me are supposed to be MDs or PhDs. Like, that's what you're supposed to do. So I've been told my whole life, that's what you're supposed to do. So I went and did it. I actually quit a company that was making money. By the way, it still exists and is making money. So this is how strong this was. I quit my freaking job, the business that I started, to go get a doctorate in like clinical and translational science and biochemistry, which, by the way, not a very lucrative thing. And so I did that for like 6 years. So I was working in labs, and, got my well, I didn't get my doctorate. I'm a high level dropout. I came to my senses. So I was doing that, and I kind of had this, I don't want to say serendipitous, because that seems like it's positive and like a negative thing happened to someone else for this. But basically, the person I was getting my doctorate underneath got into an accident.
Oh.
Car hit her while she was on her bike.
Ooh.
And she got brain damage. Temporary, thank God. But like, she got hit really hard, and she lost the ability to associate her words with certain objects. So she would like point at it and say it, but like she'd be pointing at a phone and say comb or something like that.
Oh my gosh.
So for any of you who know anything about PhDs, you have like a kind of like a board, and they freaked out, and they were like, you got to pick someone else to be your mentor. This woman's never going to come out of this. By the way, they took like 3 whole days to make that decision. Anyway, so I had to go start looking for a new mentor, and it was kind of like playing musical chairs once everybody had already sat down. And at the time I was really bummed, but what it really did was highlight to me just how screwed up this industry is, where someone with talent cannot even, get a foothold because people are like, yeah, we just don't have the grant money. Like, we can't hire you. So it kind of just really highlighted to me like the career limitations that were going to be in that field. So once that happened, I came out to Colorado for a visit, and I don't know, I was just like, fuck it, I'm moving out here. And I had no plan, nothing, like no idea. I just put all my shit, my 2-door little car that I could fit, and I drove out here to quit my doctorate. In 2 weeks, I did all of that, and I just moved out here. And like I said, it wasn't planned. It ended up being the best decision of my life, but I made it for pretty much all the wrong reasons. I didn't like have this thought out at all. And I will say that is something that I've noticed that has really helped me throughout my life, is that I am very in tune to what people will call gut feelings, intuition, like the universe, the source, your subconscious mind, whatever the frick you want to call it. That thing is real. And if you like actually, like, it doesn't make any sense, right? It comes up with the answers and it hands them to you. It doesn't hand you a white paper about how it got to the answer. It's just like, you need to move to Colorado. You're like, why? It's like, you gotta. So I'm pretty in tune with those things. And even, now that I think back of it, when I was young, I was doing that. I didn't know that's what I was doing. I thought I was just being impulsive. And maybe I am. Maybe I'm just covering up my impulsiveness with some sort of like high level grand plan here. But yeah, so I moved to Colorado and I didn't know what to do with my life. And it was a pretty dark time because like I just quit my doctorate. So you gotta imagine the amount of work and sacrifice that went into that, right? Like paid my way through college. Like it was just like I'm in debt now. Like, what the fuck did you just do? So I spent time looking for jobs at the time, and I know this sounds dumb, but I kind of forgot that I could run companies. And so I was like, I gotta go get a job in science. Started looking for jobs in science. Same problem as before, super hard to do. So like a few months go by, and no one else will hire me either, because once you have like doctorate on your freaking resume, the coffee shop does not want to hire you because they know you're gonna leave. So I was having a really hard time. And anyway, so I finally did the most Arieann thing I could think of, and I walked into someone's office and I was like, yo, this is what I do. There wasn't a job opening. There wasn't anything. It was just, this was a lab that was in the field that I had worked in. Walked into the dude's office, told him what I did. He looked at me like half baffled and was just like, okay, well, go talk to the rest of the lab, see if you like them, and then come back and we'll talk. I'm like, okay. So I go around, talk to everybody at the lab. I come back, I'm like, yeah, they're dope, let's go. And he was like, okay, well, if you can work, for free for 2 weeks, then we can talk about it. I had no better options at the time, so I was like, screw it. I mean, I was living in Springs at the time, and this was in Boulder. So for those of you who aren't from Colorado, that is like a 2-hour drive one way when you're unemployed. So I was doing that for 2 weeks in order to get this job. And then I got it. It was like $9 an hour. By the way, that's how much they pay fucking scientists. And yeah, that's what I did. And I did that for a while. And then, because the $9 an hour thing in Boulder, those two things do not mix. In Boulder, it's not the valley, but it's damn close. So in order to make ends meet, I started picking up all these part-time jobs, like these side jobs. And I would doing all kinds of crazy shit. Like one was like making chalk drawings on the sidewalk in the schools for advertisements at like 6 a.m., which, by the way, I am not a morning person. And but just doing all this stuff. And then one day I'm on Craigslist and this thing pops up and it's like needed R&D scientist for a startup part-time. I was like, fucking perfect. So I go, I interview, I get the job. And this is kind of, within weeks of being at the company, I know this sounds dumb, but I remembered that I was good at running companies. I was like, wait, I remember this now. This is like a natural thing for me. So yeah, I worked for that company and I was still full-time at the university for a while. And then I came up with the idea for Kitables. And I came up with the idea for Kitables on my birthday weekend in 2014 while I was just on a drive. And I got back down after that weekend. I told a bunch of people, and I launched Kickstarter 2 months later, and I was just chugging since then with that. But in the meantime, so we didn't have money because we hadn't raised a round yet. There was no money to pay me. And I was still, by the way, I was still working part-time at this R&D job. I was running this company, the Kitables, and I was still full-time at the university. So I work at 3 jobs now, just in case. Just keeping everybody on track here. And then, because Kitables wasn't making enough money, and my 2 jobs combined still weren't paying me enough money, and I'm like, I need to consolidate here. I need to get out of lab because I know this isn't my path anymore. I found this job to be an executive director of a co-working space. Now, I'm nowhere near qualified to do this job. It's a nonprofit. Like, I knew nothing, right? But me being me, and I think this is why, like, a lot of men get ahead in life when women don't, because we love talking ourselves out of shit like this. But for whatever reason, I don't have that. And I'll just like, of course, that job's perfect for me. It's not. But like, so I go in and I apply for it. And the guy's like, I wrote him like this novel about why his job's so awesome or whatever. So the guy only calls me back. He's like, hey man, super stoked that you're stoked, but we actually posted that like 6 months ago, and we're not looking for this person right now. And I'm like, fuck me. Okay. And he's like, just come in. We should have coffee. It sounds like you're doing some cool shit anyway. I'm like, that's fine. So I go in, we have coffee. And he's like, yeah, you know, it was like this organization called Spark. It was a nonprofit place to kind of help. Yeah. So we were, you know, just talking. I'm like, hey, you know, like, I just really want to help out. I didn't have time to help out. Okay. Like, keep it track. I had 3 fucking jobs at this point, one of which was supposed to be full time. And I did it anyway. And so I sat in their meetings every Wednesday or whatever for like 6 months. And then one day he just goes, hey, I got to go. Do you want the job?
Oh.
And I was like, at this point, Kiddables had already been through an accelerator. Like, we were in the process of raising money. So I was at this point where I didn't know, like, it was looking good, but I didn't know, right? So I got like 50-50 shot here. And I was just like, yeah, sure, why not? And that's how I ended up running 2 companies for 2 years. So, so Spark worked out and Kiddables worked out. So now I had 2 companies that I was responsible for at 20, God, how old was I? 27, I think, at that time. Yeah. And I was just like, throw to the, like, I just had, like, now I look back, I had like no business doing that. But, you know, I got through it-ish. I'm going to be honest, that may have been a mistake. I don't know if running 2 companies at the same time is a good idea, especially when they're like revenue generating companies, and one was brick and mortar, and they were 2 separate spaces, but I did learn a literal ton, and I'm very thankful for that. And yeah, so did that, and then did that for 2 years, and then I finally kind of went to the board of Spark, and I'm like, I can't do this. Like, I gained 30 pounds, like I was just a freaking wreck. So they were like, okay, so it's not like they had a choice. Like, I was quitting. I was like, I'm leaving. And anyway, so I started focusing on Kiddables full time, and then that's what I've been doing for the last year or 2 years here. And yeah, so Kiddables has been around for 4 years now and still going, and just came out with my new idea that I started working on actually, and now we're in 60 plus countries, and we're licensing out our Build and Brews program, which is basically like paint wine nights, but with drones and beer. So we're starting to license that out, and you know, this could all be over in 2 months, but it could also not. So, and that's startup life there for you in a nutshell. So yeah, just kind of chugging along here, and I got to add international speaker to my resume recently because I got invited to go out to Australia by the Queensland government, go talk about the CEO thing and like startup environments, because that's what Spark did. We were cultivating like a co-working space, entrepreneurial development center, and we made actually an entire private school that was state certified. So we did that in like 2 years, which was kind of crazy. So yeah, it's been quite the freaking wild ride, I'll tell you that.
No doubt, no doubt. So
yeah.
do you ever take vacations?
I don't know what those are. I don't think I've ever taken one. I know. Everybody's like, it's unhealthy. I'm like, I get it. But if you weren't paying attention, I've been broke for most of my life. So vacations are, you know, I do take the weekends off. Like, I am pretty good about that. Like, I'll take 4-day weekends, but have I ever been taken 2 weeks and gone sat on a beach? No, I have never done that. If I take like a 4-day weekend, it's because we're all like, let's go run 200 miles in the mountains, you know?
Right.
So yeah, I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm just saying like that's something I'm still working on.
Sure. Hey, did you hit the pause button on your video?
No.
Okay,
I did not.
We're frozen.
Uh-oh. Well, I can still hear you. So.
Okay, well, I do this on YouTube too, so we'll just have at some point it should catch back up. And I'll just trim this out. Okay, so.
Oh, my internet just dropped out. I wonder what the hell is going on there. That's weird. All right, yeah, at least we got audio.
Okay, well, we at least do have the audio. So let me ask you, you kind of, you're saying impulsive and other things, but really in touch with, whatever that is. It's intuition, it's the universe, it's whatever that is. How do you get in touch with that? Is it something that's just so natural for you that you don't know the difference, or is there something you do to stay connected to whatever that is?
Well, I think mine is honestly like it was naturally strengthened. I think everybody has it, but I think I got like a little extra dose of it because it was a survival mechanism. Like my brain had to run the numbers constantly to know whether I needed to like haul ass out of a situation. So I think that's actually where that comes from. And that's what I'm saying. Like, and I truly do have this feeling that like sometimes the darkest parts actually have the best parts in them. And I think that's one of them. Like, while the reason that got honed was horrible, the effect of it later in life has been really great. Because you can think of your subconscious mind or whatever you want to call it as the world's most sophisticated machine learning machine. Like it is. That's what it is. It's running data in the background 24/7. You don't even notice it. And like I said, the unfortunate part is though, it never hands you its it doesn't show its work, right? Like it just, and I think this is why it feels like cheating, right? Like if you're a teacher at a school and this kid just kept handing in all of his math homework with just the answer and showed none of its work, you'd be like, what the hell? You're cheating. But like, that's how it works. Like you don't get to know how, you just get the answer. And you're kind of, the difficult part of it really is just being like, listening to it. Not perfect at it. I ignore it all the time. But sometimes, and I know everybody's had this, right? Where you just like, you're walking and all of a sudden this freaking thing pops in your head that you haven't thought about, or, it makes no sense. It's totally out of context.
Yeah.
To me, that's like your brain going, yo, dude, something around this. Like, and again, you don't get to know what, you don't get to know why. You just know that there's something around it. And more often than not for me, it's people that I should be getting in touch with.
Oh.
So yeah, or people that I should be around. And that seems to be like, people always talk about their superpower. That's kind of part of one of mine, is that I always do find myself where I need to be when I need to be there. So I think that's part of it. And again, this is just my ramblings about this. I'm not exactly what you would call a spiritual person, but I do believe in the power of your own brain. And I think it's super powerful if you can listen to it and hone it in.
So how much of this listening to it is of kind of rational conscious mind, and how much of it is more emotional?
So I think that's the issue. People like what the sticking point with a lot of like what I would consider analytical people with this whole idea of like this gut feeling thing. And I think it's because our society has kind of trained people to think that gut feeling is automatically bullshit, because it's more of an emotive feeling than a logical one. Like I said, you're not going to get the white paper on this feeling. You're just going to get a feeling. And, again, there are also bad feelings. I'm not saying that's always right. Right? Like if you just listen to your, like if you're, like, and I think this is like when people say the angel and the devil on your shoulder, like it's not always right. If it's sitting there and it's 2 a.m. and it's like, take the next shot, like don't listen to it. But, or do, just realize the consequences, like it's different. It's just like any thought that, or any piece of advice that anybody would have for you,
Sure.
But it's coming from yourself, if that makes any sense. Anyway, I really do think there's something to be said there about the power of that running every data point that you've ever gotten inputted into the background, and kind of just figuring out ways those all go together, and then telling your conscious brain like, yo dude, you gotta text this guy, and you're like, why? And you're like, you just gotta.
So tell me a little bit about, the experience when you were a student, you were getting your PhD, you're obviously more in tune to kind of the emotional, emotive, or whatever the subconscious kind of life is. What was it like being around people that were wholly bought in to the analytical world?
Well, I am that person. And that's why, I am that person through and through. I'm an analytical person. Like I absolutely am. And that's what took me so long to really just come to terms with that feeling. Because I denied it for a while. Like I said, like I would do it and I didn't realize I was doing it. It took me many, many years to become aware of like where those were coming from. I just didn't have any inhibition. So I did whatever popped into my little head. So, but now I've gotten older and I have inhibitions. Like I've started to look at that a little bit more critically. And yeah, so I feel like, again, those two things can exist. You can, because that is a logical thing. This is an analytical process, right? You just got to understand that that is your brain. It is doing the work. You're just not aware of it. You know, like what's your brain doing when you're sleeping, guys? It's doing stuff. You know, like, any sleep test will tell you that it's doing a lot. It's like defragging. It's doing a lot. And I truthfully thought some of that is like it's running problems in the background. Like how many times have you heard people say, oh, I just stopped thinking about it and the answer came to me, or I figured it out, or I took a nap and it, you know, like we hear this over and over and over again. And I think that's what's going on. You just need to allow it to do the work. It's going to do the work. And it's not, to me, it's not a God, it's not the source, it's not the universe, it's your freaking brain. And yeah, that's, to me, a very analytical way of looking at what other people refer to as gut feelings.
That's very interesting. So when you were at the point of ending your doctorate work and deciding to move to Colorado, how did that process play out inside of you? Was it just one moment you were a PhD student, the next moment I'm traveling to Colorado?
Yeah. I mean, again, this is kind of before I really had any inhibition. I got like, I'm moving to Colorado. Yeah. It's like, damn, right? Yeah, I didn't think about it. I can't describe how much I did not think about it. All I knew was that I didn't like Florida, and I wasn't where I needed to be. I didn't know where I needed to be, but I knew this wasn't it. And that's about as much thought that went into that. Yeah, I would like to say like, and I think that's part of this kind of message is like, and again, I struggle with this because again, I am a very analytical person. I want to know the how. I want to know exactly what the steps are, how we're going to get to our fucking goals, how we're going to do this, right? Sometimes you just flat out don't know. And all you got to do is be like, it's going to get there. You know, like when I made that move at like 25, 26 or however old I was, I wasn't like, oh, you know, like I want to own a company one day. Like I wasn't consciously saying this to myself. Right. But that's what ended up happening. And I would say that's for the better. You could argue it probably would have gone poorly too, and it did for a while. It absolutely did. But, you know, I dug myself out of it. And that's one of the other gifts that I was given in my childhood is that I know I can pretty much dig myself out of any hole. So I can do things like that where I'm just like, I'm going to move across the country because fuck it, you know? I'll figure it out. And I think that's, you know, something that I have to remind myself of a lot to stay positive. It's like, yo, dude, how many times have you not figured it out? Pretty much zero. So we're good. But yeah, like I said, I'm saying all this with confidence. Like on it, this is a daily struggle for me to like stay positive and not go down this like deep hole of despair, especially when you're an entrepreneur. It's super easy to just be like, everything's fucked.
Yeah.
It's super easy. So yeah.
Indeed.
It's like ultra positive Arieann talking right now.
So what would not ultra positive Arieann say right now?
The shit is hard. Like I think people look at, and I think we kind of skirt over the fact about how hard things like entrepreneurship really are. And it's not because of workload or the never-ending task of list of stuff to do or whatever else. It's really this like freaking emotional journey that you have to go on as like a person, because you're supposed to be this leader, and especially young people, because we're always pushing like 21-year-olds to found companies. Newsflash, 21-year-olds are in no way emotionally ready to do this. They might be intellectually ready, but they are not emotionally ready. Like, how are you going to lead a team when you don't even know yourself yet? Right. So And that's kind of the journey you got to go on. And again, one of my theories is you usually have to go to the real dark places to get the good out or to be the best version of yourself. And that's extremely painful. And you're going through all of that while you have like 2 months worth of runway left and payroll to pay and like your employees being a dick and you feel weird in your own office and like you don't know what to do, but these people are waiting for you to say what to do. And you're just like grabbing at straws the whole time. And then like society is like showing you at the same time, like showing you images of like, you know, like, oh, if you're not working 100 hours a week, you ain't shit. And like, you know, blah. And it's over freaking whelming. Sometimes you just like really get beat down. Like I will admit, I have actually cried. I don't cry in public. There's probably like 10 times on record that I've cried in public. One of them was when I realized that I couldn't pull Spark up. Like I wasn't the person to do it. And like, we're having this meeting and cried like in the middle of a meeting. And yeah, it's hard. It really is. It's going to be very hard. It's like, it's almost like I equate being an entrepreneur to being a competitive athlete or like an ultra athlete or, you know, like an Olympic athlete. Like you're trying to be the best at your craft. And that requires a shit ton of sacrifice, right? Like you got to get up for practice every day. It's like 6 a.m. You got to eat. Like they go through so much to get there. Right. And a lot of people don't see that. And again, like in our pop culture, it's all like people in Lambos and just being like, oh yeah, like I do this so easy. And it's like, it probably is now, but it wasn't always that way. And everybody's got to, you know, you got to put in the work. And the work is sometimes really hard. Like, just is. Yeah.
No doubt, it really is. So as you've kind of gone down this journey that you're on, this long, winding journey, have you had any heroes that you look up to that have inspired you?
So honestly, no. I know that sounds super weird, slightly narcissistic, but I've never really been that person. I've never had heroes. I've never had someone where I was like, wow, I wish I was that person. And I think that's, again, just because I learned to grow up without any real guidance. So it all comes from me internally. And while that might, again, double-edged sword, I think that's a really good thing because all they do need is me. You put me out on an island, I'm like, all right, we can figure this out. But at the same time, yeah, I feel like I'm missing out on the part of something that could be easier for me in integrating what other successful people have done and kind of modeling stuff after them. So yeah, the answer to that is oddly no.
Interesting.
And I still don't.
So, well, that, if it served you so far, thinking about that. So now that you're a little bit older and you've had what a lot of people would call crazy success, what do you want to change about yourself? Or is there anything you want to change about yourself?
Oh yeah, tons. So like I said, like the kind of survival mechanisms that I built up over like the early 20-something years of my life, while they've served me for that time, have really been hindering me as far as my professional progress. So in order to become the best CEO that I can and create the best companies and the best products and things like that, like I really needed to go over, quote unquote, some of my bullshit. You know, like kind of like the hero thing. I think that's part of it. Like I need to realize that other people, like happiness, success, things like that are not zero-sum games. I do not need to be competitive. I do not need to constantly be putting myself down. You know, I have a paradigm that says everything always has to be hard. And that's always repeating in my head. And that affects my company. That affects my employees. That affects everything, right? I'm not married. I don't have a co-founder. There's probably a freaking reason for that. It's me. And like, yeah. So like for me, the things that I need to work on are very personal in a way that I just need to honestly just chill the hell out and be more positive, both to other people and to myself, so that I can create more abundance for the team and the company and myself. So that's what I want to change and what I'm kind of currently working on. And as much as it pains me to say this, because again, like I know I'm talking very foo-foo this whole chat, because I'm right in the midst of one of these like transformation like times, but like I can't tell you how much I roll my eyes when people are like, oh my God, the crystals ground me. Like I can't like I live in Boulder. I hate kale. Yoga's weird. And like, like I do not get malas, but like, so basically the opposite of Heather, which is great because we're best friends. But yeah, like I just don't buy into any of that shit. But yeah, I started a daily, what I call gratitude practice. And it's just me sitting down every morning and being like, yo, I'm thankful for this. And I'm thankful for all these things that will happen in the future. And I know it sounds dumb, but it just makes me happier. And happier Arieann is positive Arieann, and a positive person is going to be more creative and work better. And that's what I need to do. So I see it, I'm trying to integrate these things, a routine, to try to get me to be, it's practice for my game, if you will. So it's taken me a while to get to that point in my life where I'm like, hey, maybe, you know, like, and again, I am still that person that will party till 3 a.m. So like integrating those two people is currently my challenge. Integrating the kid double fisting icing and running around the ball pit that everybody loves. Like I'm entertaining as shit, especially after a couple of drinks. But you know, trying to keep that part of me because I think that's the youthful part that's very important. But at the same time, integrate this new side where it's like, hey, we get up in the morning, we have like a routine where we eat food because that's important. And, you know, just kind of get more grounded and show up better for my company.
Very cool. So you're kind of in the middle of this transition of trying to, whatever you want to call it, maybe it's self-improvement. Would you go back and tell that young PhD student to do something differently, or would you just let her go down the path?
I mean, so here's the thing about me. I'm stubborn as all get out. And you know, people say that. They're like, oh, don't you wish you started this earlier? I'm like, I totally do. Here's the thing. I wouldn't have done it. Even if, like, I came back and I was like, yo, dude, you should do this to make your life a lot better. I'd be like, fuck that. Like, I wasn't ready to hear it, right? Mm-hmm. So when you're ready, right? Like kind of there's like this joke in Sex and the City that I always use for relationships. So basically, you know, like you can't get in the taxi unless the light's on. So until that light's on, it's not going to work. And that's like a relationship. Like you're not going to be ready for a relationship until you are. And I wasn't ready to make this transition into the next version or leveling up, if you will. I wasn't ready. And I don't think I would have listened, even if someone told me that. So.
So what if you were given an opportunity to tell somebody who was at a point of wanting to make a change in their own life? What's the one thing that you would tell them?
I think I would just say do it. I mean, like that. Like if you listen to my story, if you listen to any what you would call a successful person's story, you will notice one key thing about their story. And that is whenever a door is available, they go through it. Like, and you'll see this time and time again. Like they don't say no to opportunities, right? They don't talk themselves out of it. They don't go, oh, well, but screw that. Just do it. When has just doing it ever gone wrong, really? You know, and that's what I would say. Like, if you're thinking, oh, I want to move, then do it. If you're, you know, and you'll come up with a million reasons why you shouldn't, you know, like, oh, I can't move the kids or, you know, blah, 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 or something. But yeah, like those are always going to be there. And unless it's a severely legitimate reason, I think you just need to do what you feel like you need to do. Even if that doesn't make sense at the time.
Very good. Cool. So I've got as I listen to you talk about, well, everything you're talking about, do you have a definition of success?
No, I don't, and I don't think I ever will. I think that's just kind of the nature of my being, is that, like, even if I woke up tomorrow and sold a company for 10 million, I'd probably wake up the next day and be like, I need 20. Like, it's never going to stop. And whether that's a good or a bad thing, I've yet to determine. But yeah, for me, like, I don't think it's ever going to stop, because I think that's really the beauty of life, is getting to experience those new things and novelty, and trying to strive for the next thing. So yeah, I don't think there's ever going to be a point where I'm like, all right, we're good. We did it. I could probably have a Nobel Prize in something and like 3 doctors and have like 18 companies and be like, feel like we should add professional windsurfer to this, like.
Sure. So, so as you just listed off all kinds of, I mean, a huge variety of things. What to you is the most important thing in life?
So to me, it's experiences, and particularly, I seem to like novel ones, and just getting to experience everything. And more importantly, I think for me, it's experiencing it with others. So kind of my dark joke is that, so you ever read Into the Wild or watched the movie?
Yes.
Yeah. So at the end, so basically, for those listening that haven't read it, it's like this, I'm trying not to give away the story, but basically the dude ends up dying.
Right.
And the last thing he writes in his journal is that, like, happiness is only, or something like, experiences are only meaningful when shared. And I was like, I read something, and I was like, and again, this is super dark, but this is just me, and I was like, the idiot had to die for that. Like, that's just freaking obvious to me. Like, I was just like, duh. Yeah, like, I truly feel that. But, like, I will not say no to an experience, even if it's super dumb to me. Like, my friend Heather, who I've mentioned multiple times in this, and she's like, hey, man, do you want to go do this detox foot bath and hang out in a salt cave for like an hour? And it's like this totally foo-foo, whatever. But I'm like, yeah, sure. Like, I'm just, like, I just say yes to anything. Like, you want to run a triathlon? Yeah, sure. Do you want to, like, go do, like, whatever, like, name it. Like, there are very few things where I'm like, hard pass. So yeah, I think just being open to experiences and getting to experience as much as humanly possible before I get off the planet.
Very, very cool. So if people wanted to know a little bit more about you, or get in touch with you, what are the best methods to do that?
Email me, because I'm a millennial, and if you call me, I'll be confused. So
Awesome.
We don't pick up phones. That was pretty funny.
That's
my
pretty
friend, good. An older friend today was like, oh, I'll photocopy it for you. And I was like, dude, just take a picture of it. She's like, oh, right.
Photocopy it and fax it to you if you'd like.
I'm like, just text it.
Cool. Well, very cool. So I really appreciate you spending some time with me today, Arieann. I always end with one last question.
Okay.
And that question is, what question should I have asked you?
Hard one. God damn. Trying to think. Oh, you know what would be a good one for my story, kind of a balancing act. Like, how many spontaneous decisions have ended poorly for you?
Okay.
So
Answer the question.
Yeah, I have had, and these are mostly physical injuries, but I've had most bones broken in my body. I've done a lot of dumb stuff. Let me put it like that, right? Thankfully, nothing has been super permanent except my tailbone. Like, I broke my tailbone and I didn't go to the doctor because I'm just a stubborn asshole. And like, now that whole area is screwed up and I couldn't run for a few years. So there are definitely consequences to like not thinking all the way through things sometimes. But in my experience, they tend to be short-lived, or, like you're like, okay, like last year, I was just like, I'm going to race downhill mountain bike. Did I train for that? Fuck no. I did it. I hurt myself. Like I got into a car accident. I broke my bike. I made it through, but I haven't been able to mountain bike since. And mountain biking is like one of my favorite things in the world. So, yeah, like you can mess yourself up. Now, if I had made the spontaneous decision to downhill mountain bike and then followed it up with a routine training, that would have been a different story, which is why I'm working on the routine follow-up part right now. So I think that's an important part of the story is like, when I say go do what you feel like you need to do, but you don't understand why yet, like there's a middle part there which like prepare for that. Now that you've made that decision, get your brain involved. Like, what is it? Follow your heart, but take your brain with you. Do that. I was not taking my brain with me when I was younger, so it hurt a lot.
Oh, cool. Well, thank you so much for spending some time with me today. This has been really enjoyable, and I wish you luck with your current company, your next company, and what's your pharmaceutical company going to make?
I don't know yet.
Okay.
Some doctorate that actually finished theirs is probably going to tell me in a few years.
Very cool. Well, best of luck in all of the businesses, and thank you again for spending time with us today.
Yes, thank you so much, man.